This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. And now, you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. Important note. Sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Let's start with a question. If you could choose the plot of your own horror movie, what would it be? Maybe demonic possession, or running from a crazed killer, or battling some otherworldly creature. For me, the absolute worst horror movies are those involving home invasions. Movies like Funny Games, The Strangers, Us, and Hush hit on an innate fear. Now what if I told you a real-life nightmare unfolded in 1986 and 1987 in a small town in Massachusetts, and that the details seem to have been pulled not just from one horror movie, but a handful. Truly, when I came across the horrifying case of Daniel LaPlante a few years ago, I initially had a hard time believing it was true. Because this real-life case includes all of the worst a horror movie has to offer. And as shocking as the crimes were, so too is the perpetrator, a 17-year-old teenage boy. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the terrifying case of Daniel LaPlante. What compelled him to commit a horrible tragedy in December 1987. I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Born on May 15, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts, Daniel LaPlante had, by all accounts, a traumatic childhood. His parents divorced when he was young, leaving his mother to raise him. With his father out of the picture, Daniel's mother worked long hours to make ends meet, leaving Daniel to care for himself. But soon enough, things seemed to take a turn for the better. She eventually remarried, and almost overnight, Daniel had a stepfather and 2 younger stepbrothers. And according to one article, quote, even his biological father circled back into the mix, offering to help with childcare, end quote. On the surface, all of this seems positive, except Daniel claimed he'd been abused by his biological father, stepfather, and psychiatrist. A few important notes. As far as I could find, there is no evidence to support Daniel's claims of being abused. Despite my attempts, I could not find police reports, public records, or anything other than various articles citing his self-report. Despite this, the lack of evidence doesn't disprove Daniel's claims. It is a tragic reality that many victims of abuse cannot prove their abuse. And it's an equally tragic reality that many victims simply do not come forward about the abuse they suffered. Complicating matters for Daniel were his struggles at school. He was diagnosed with dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, which is now attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. These diagnoses contributed to poor grades. He struggled to fit in with his peers and had difficulty making friends. One article stated, quote, his classmates didn't just ignore him, they singled him out. Daniel's awkward demeanor and lack of personal hygiene earned him the unkind nickname of class creep, making him an easy target for ridicule, end quote. As a teenager, Daniel was arrested several times for breaking into houses and stealing money, jewelry, and other valuables. But not only that, he developed an interesting pattern. He would move items or furniture around the house, or leave random items laying around for the homeowner to find later, no doubt, with the intention of scaring them. At some point, Daniel's interest was piqued by 15-year-old Tina Bowen, and though no one is sure how he knew her or got her phone number, he eventually reached out and expressed his interest. Something interesting. There are some who believe Daniel got a hold of Tina's phone number after breaking into the Bowen family home. As the two began talking, Daniel told Tina he was blonde, athletic, and attractive, all of which caught her attention, and none of which was true. He told Tina he attended a different school, that she had caught his eye, and he was interested in going out with her. They talked on the phone for a few weeks, and after a short time, Tina agreed to go on a date with Daniel, or the person she assumed was Daniel. When he arrived at Tina's home to pick her up for their date, she was shocked at who she saw. Daniel was nothing like he claimed. He was not blonde, athletic, or well-groomed. Instead, Daniel was, quote, a disheveled, greasy, dark-haired boy with no attractive features whatsoever, end quote. Despite this, Tina agreed to go out with Daniel to a local fair. Unbeknownst to him, at least at first, was that Tina's mother had recently passed away from cancer. But more than offering condolences, Daniel, quote, took great interest regarding the details of Tina's mother's death, end quote. In fact, Daniel's response bordered on obsessive, as he interrogated Tina about her mother's illness, suffering, and how she felt at the exact moment her mother passed away. Within an hour, Tina excused herself from the date and returned home, and she refused to voluntarily see Daniel again. A short time after going out with him, and possibly activated by Daniel's questioning, Tina and her 8-year-old sister, Karen, decided to hold a seance in their basement to try and contact their deceased mother. An important note: the seance was unsophisticated, likely born of grief, and performed purely out of teenage naivety. Later that night, while Tina and Karen were asleep in their rooms, they heard strange, rhythmic tapping on their bedroom walls. Convinced the seance had worked, the girls were initially excited and spoke to the spirit they believed was their mother. They asked questions and received answers in the form of knocks on the wall. Though they were initially excited about communicating with their mother, the knocks continued for several nights, to the point where it affected the girls' sleep. Then, the situation escalated. The knocking turned into something far scarier. They noticed objects around the house began disappearing or were moved entirely. They'd find items scattered on the floor that at last glance were sitting on a table or countertop. On several occasions, they would return home and find furniture moved from one side of the room to another. And, while at first the girls believed they'd been communicating with the spirit of their mother, they quickly became convinced they'd let something far darker and more malevolent into their home. Frank Bowen, their father, refused to believe them, and instead thought they were doing this themselves. One night, in January 1987, while Frank was at work, Tina and Karen heard the usual knocking. It had become commonplace. Except this time, instead of hearing it in the walls, the sound was coming from the basement. The sisters grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly walked down the basement stairs, towards the area where they heard the knocking. There, on the basement wall, written in blood red, was a message. "I'm in your room. Come and find me." The girls ran from their home to a neighbor's house, where they waited for their father to pick them up. When he arrived, they told him about their discovery in the basement. But despite seeing it for himself, he still believed his daughters were responsible for all the strange occurrences in the home. So he scheduled a time for the girls to meet with a therapist, confident their behaviors were due to their mother's recent passing. Something important. As you're listening, you may be thinking, I can't believe he didn't believe his daughters. But consider that he just recently lost his wife and was now a single parent raising 2 girls. He was likely working long hours to provide and care for them. In other words, it seems that Frank Bowen was simply doing the best he could to raise his daughters while navigating his own grief and sense of loss. After the terrifying incident in the basement, things quieted down for a few weeks. Until one night, the girls heard knocking behind Tina's bedroom wall. When they went to investigate, they found another message written in blood red. "I'm back. Find me if you can." Like the previous incident, the girls ran from their home to a neighbor's house, and like before, they waited for their father to arrive. Except this time, Frank went straight to his home to prove to the girls there was no one there. When he entered, he immediately noticed the home was, quote, in further disarray than what his neighbor and the girls had previously claimed, end quote. Instantly, he realized they'd been telling the truth. Someone had been inside their home. Frank went to Tina's room, as this was where she and Karen had found the ominous message earlier that night. There, on the wall, written in blood red, was another message. Marry me. As Frank scanned the room, he was horrified to find a teenage boy standing in the corner on the other side. He was wearing a blonde wig, had put on makeup, and was wearing the wedding dress of Frank's deceased wife. The boy was Daniel LaPlante, and in his hands, he was holding a hatchet. Perhaps out of instinct, Frank lunged at Daniel, and a struggle ensued. But amidst the chaos, Daniel broke free and seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving Frank, quote, dumbfounded at the way LaPlante was able to seemingly disappear from sight without much effort, end quote. With Daniel gone, Frank called the police, who arrived within minutes to investigate. When authorities arrived, they discovered the blood-red messages on the wall were written in ketchup. But that's not all they found. After hearing Frank describe how Daniel got away so easily, police were equally as dumbfounded about how he was able to do it. Then, an officer found a crawl space hidden behind a dresser that was built into the wall in Tina's bedroom. The officer pulled it open and looked inside. There, curled up in the crawl space, was Daniel LaPlante. He was immediately arrested and removed from the Bowens' home. Police then conducted a more thorough investigation, and were horrified to find that Daniel LaPlante had been living inside the walls of their home for quite some time. The crawl space connected to an extensive tunnel system inside the walls of the house, and he was able to move freely without much effort. There was something else. Along the way, Daniel made peepholes throughout the home, so he could spy on Tina at any time, no matter which room she was in. It is all but certain that he'd witnessed the seance from behind the wall. Then for months, he pretended to be the ghost of Tina and Karen's dead mother, knocking on the walls to convince them the seance had worked. And it is believed he dressed up as the girl's dead mother as a twisted sort of reveal, no doubt to terrify them, but possibly for something far worse. Remember, when Frank found Daniel, he was holding a hatchet. That the girls had the presence of mind to escape is nothing short of miraculous. After his arrest, Daniel LaPlante was placed in juvenile detention, where he remained until October 1987. Any hopes for rehabilitation were quickly dashed, as upon release, he began burglarizing homes in the neighborhood. In one robbery, he stole 2 handguns from a neighbor's house. A Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court record offers startling details. Quote, on October 14, 1987, between 12 p.m. and 2:15 p.m., someone broke into 38 Elm Street, the home of Raymond Pindell and his family. 2 Ruger .22 caliber guns and their holsters were stolen, as was a sizable amount of cash. Approximately 3 weeks later, the defendant's stepfather discovered one of Pindell's stolen guns and its holster in the defendant's laundry basket. When confronted by his parents, the defendant claimed he had obtained the gun a year earlier from Westminster. End quote. Why would Daniel LaPlante steal 2 handguns? I'll pause here for a quick trigger warning. The following contains graphic descriptions of violence against children, sexual assault against an adult, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. On November 16, 1987, quote, someone broke into the Gustafson home. Among other things, the thief took a cordless telephone, 2 cable television boxes, a cable television remote control device, and some coins from a Liberty silver dollar collection. The defendant placed the Gustafsons' cordless telephone and a cable box in his brother's tool cabinet. The defendant told his brother that he was putting them there to prevent his parents from seeing them. At that time, the defendant's brother also saw the defendant with some silver coins, similar to those reported missing from the Gustafson home, including a Statue of Liberty coin in a box." End quote. On December 1st, 1987, Daniel LaPlante once again broke into the home of the Gustafson family, which consisted of husband and father Andrew, wife and mother Priscilla, who was also pregnant, and their 2 young children, Abigail and William. Andrew Gustafson was at work at the time of the break-in. What he found when he returned home is nearly impossible to grasp. The court record offers horrific details. Quote, "At approximately 5 p.m. on December 1st, 1987, Andrew Gustafson discovered the body of his wife Priscilla Gustafson on the bed in the master bedroom of the family's home in Townsend. She died as a result of 2 shots at close range with a .22 caliber firearm. The shots were fired through a pillow which lay on top of the victim's head. Gustafson telephoned the police immediately, who on arrival discovered the bodies of Gustafson's 2 children, William, 5 years old, and Abigail, almost 8 years old. The police found William's body face down in the tub in the upstairs bathroom. The police discovered Abigail's body face down in the tub in the downstairs bathroom. The cause of death of both children was drowning. Additionally, Abigail suffered blunt trauma to the head and compression of the neck. Carolyn LeClaire, a chemist with the Department of Public Safety, found semen and sperm cells near one corner of the bedspread, and a portion of a condom on the floor beside the bed. In the bedroom closet, LeClaire found a knotted brown sock dampened with saliva, consistent with having been used as a gag. She also found 7 ligatures, a necktie, a sock, stockings, and pantyhose which had been knotted and cut. In the bedroom, police found a nearly full bottle of beer that apparently had been taken from the Gustafson refrigerator. In the kitchen wastebasket, police found several pieces of paper which were torn from the pages of a pornographic magazine." End quote. Authorities quickly connected Daniel LaPlante to the Gustafson murders and sought to bring him in for questioning. Except, he'd fled the area. He was on the run and considered armed and extremely dangerous. A short time after the murders, he broke into a woman's home in a nearby town and kidnapped her in her vehicle. She managed to escape unharmed, and 48 hours after the search began, police found Daniel LaPlante hiding in a dumpster. Quote, "The Commonwealth offered evidence of consciousness of guilt. The defendant left his home on the evening of December 2nd, 1987, after state police arrived and asked to speak with him. The next morning, the defendant unlawfully entered 2 homes in Pepperell, stole a .32 caliber revolver, and unsuccessfully tried to gain admittance into a 3rd home. At the home of Pamela McKella in Pepperell, the defendant ordered McKella at gunpoint to drive him in her van to Fitchburg. McKella jumped out of the van, and the defendant continued on in her van. The defendant was arrested in an Ayer Industrial Park dumpster. At police barracks, while searching the defendant, police found a loaded .32 caliber revolver hidden in the defendant's underwear, and a .32 caliber bullet inside his right sneaker." End quote. Daniel LaPlante was arrested and charged with the murders of Priscilla, Abigail, and William Gustafson, and the forensic evidence connecting him to the crime was indisputable. The court record offers condemning details. Quote, "During this period, the defendant asked both his brother and Pawlowski for bullets. The defendant told him he wanted to make a large bullet and sell it. Toward the end of November, Pawlowski gave the defendant a number of .22 caliber bullets from a carton he owned. Pawlowski gave the remaining bullets to a coworker. Subsequent ballistics tests and laboratory analysis of the remaining bullets revealed that they were the same brand, caliber class, and casing composition of the ones used in the murder of Priscilla Gustafson. The Commonwealth also linked the defendant to the murders through physical evidence. Laboratory analysis of the defendant's blood revealed that he is a type A secretor, the same status of the semen stain discovered on the bedspread where Priscilla Gustafson's body was found. Laboratory analysis also revealed that fibers, bearing the same microscopic and optical characteristics as a fiber sample taken from a shirt located in the woods, were found on the clothing worn by the defendant on the day of the murders, on the socks found in his bedroom, on the belt found with the murder weapon, and in 3 places at the murder scene. In addition, fiber samples taken from the sock believed to be used to gag Priscilla Gustafson matched samples found on the gray shirt worn by the defendant on the day of the murders." End quote. A year later, Daniel LaPlante was convicted and given 3 consecutive life sentences for the murders. For much of his time in prison, he showed little remorse for his crimes. And from 1988 to 2014, he attempted to sue the courts multiple times for what he considered violations of his human rights. He alleged the prison system denied access to, quote, "sufficient materials in order to carry out certain satanic rites," end quote. In 2017, as his appeal for a reduced sentence was being considered, Daniel LaPlante made a statement. Quote, "I do not have the words to fully express my profound sorrow, but I am truly sorry for the harm I have caused. From the very essence of who I am, from the depth of my soul, I am sorry." End quote. Daniel LaPlante's appeal was denied, and he will spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of parole. Andrew Gustafson, the only survivor of Daniel LaPlante's murderous rampage, passed away in 2014. On his deathbed, he stated, quote, "Don't ever let him out. He should rot in prison." End quote. I'll admit, of all the cases we've covered on the show, this one might be the scariest. It checks off nearly every "holy shit, this is a horror movie" box that exists. Despite the massive amount of information I found on this case, there is one major detail that seems to be elusive: a motive. Aside from the universal agreement that Daniel LaPlante had some type of mental health issue, the question of motive remains unanswered today, nearly 40 years after the crimes. The escalation from burglary to phrogging to sexual assault and murder is shocking, and it's tragic that multiple families and dozens of lives were affected by unfathomable and senseless violence. Daniel LaPlante, who today is just a few weeks shy of his 55th birthday, will spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. And though Andrew Gustafson passed away 3 years before this was confirmed and certified by a Massachusetts court, his words were eerily prophetic. Daniel LaPlante will never be let out, and he will rot in prison. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with this lingering question: what compelled Daniel LaPlante to commit a horrific tragedy on December 1st, 1987. I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.